Theorizing that primetime audiences were ready for a new time travel series, NBC and creator Donald Bellisario debuted Quantum Leap on March 26, 1989. Starring Scott Bakula and Dean Stockwell, the series followed Dr. Sam Beckett for 5 seasons of time-hopping adventures and vanished. Now, NBC Universal has resurrected the cult series for a new era. Starring Raymond Lee and Caitlin Bassett, the series once again follows a scientist as he leaps through history, making right what once went wrong. But just what is the show getting right and wrong? That's what we'll explore here on Oh Boy.
Oh boy, it's a Quantum Leap podcast. My name is Nate, and with me as always, a co-host we can all see in here. It's Brian Martin.
Hello, hello.
Hello, Brian. Well, welcome back from vacation. You missed quite a bit.
Yeah. I missed it. I felt only slightly guilty, I gotta admit. I was in a far better place.
But what a time to step away, am I right?
Oh my God. Like, given everything we've been talking about since we started recording this.
Yeah, I am drinking tonight. I have poured the spirits, and this show is absolutely bonkers. I swear to God. This show is bonkers. I don't know what... When we didn't get to record last week, I was just like, how can we... I don't know. So now we've got to squeeze this in. It's good.
How do we miss this?
We're gonna we discussed we're gonna try and do this sort of a back-to-back.
Yeah, so we'll talk about episode 5, and then we'll move on to episode 6, both of which I thought were really, really fun episodes.
Yeah.
One a little bit meatier on the mystery scale than the other, probably.
Mm-hmm.
But we will definitely get to that.
Yeah, they both have their moments. So who accepted the nudge for episode 5?
I think he accepted the nudge because he was old, and he's like, whatever. 1879. Ben has improbably leaped, again beyond his own lifetime, into Diego de la Cruz, an aging gunfighter in the boomtown of Salvation, which is currently under siege by a gang of outlaws trying to force the townsfolk out on behalf of a railroad company that wants the land. Meanwhile, the government chickens have come home to roost, as it were, at Project Quantum Leap. Ben's leaping, as was alluded to a few episodes ago, has attracted the attention of the Government Oversight Committee, and they have sent a representative to the project to get some answers.
Now, did they send her, or did she kind of show up of her own volition?
I feel like maybe she just came on her own. Maybe the group, the whole Oversight Committee doesn't know. It's because they're a government agency. Maybe I would believe that they're mostly uninformed and not paying attention.
That's how I read that. I thought that she was acting on her own instincts there, but maybe I'm reading that wrong, but that's what it seemed like.
I think you're right. Congresswoman Kavita Adani.
Oh, there, you've got her name.
Yeah, that was 2 blanks an hour ago. I had to dig for that one. I was like, I didn't catch that. Sorry. It comes knocking on the project's doors, and I think maybe possibly sets up some interesting things in the future.
Yeah,
and I think they are just seeds that are being planted with no specific intent as of this moment, but could germinate in a couple different ways.
Yeah, that's the interesting bit of that episode outside of what I assume you...
Oh, well, I mean, like,
the big...
We're going to really, I'm going to say right now, we're going to bury the lead on this one, because if we don't, we're going to spend the entire podcast just talking about one thing.
Yeah, we definitely could. To me, this Oversight Committee's visit to the project, that's where the episode was for me. I can tell you that the town of Salvation and that 7 Samurai storyline has been done to death.
See,
I don't think that the story for the leap of episode 5 even merits discussion. It's just...
Wow.
You know what?
I want to really just pause here for a second, because I thought this was going to go one of 2 ways for you. Because you are a gunslinger fan.
Yes.
Right?
Unquestionably, that is correct.
I don't know where it falls in terms of your favorite genres, but it's got to be near the top.
Near the top, certainly. Yeah.
So I was like, this is the way I thought it in my head verbatim. Nate's either going to really appreciate the attempt made or he's going to hate it. Like, it was like, well, they tried.
Did you lean one way or the other?
Well, I certainly am now, Nate.
Yeah. No, it's a matter of that particular storyline. I'm just done with it. How many times have we seen it, and how many different ways can we tell it? And the answer is,
I think the answer was 2.
Yeah, it's all so telegraphed.
You could tell it with samurais, and you could tell it with gunfighters. Or I'll say 2.5, because you can also tell it with clone troopers, as we learned on an episode of the Clone Wars.
And I thought you were going to lean towards The Mandalorian. That is where...
They also did it on The Mandalorian, you're right.
Yes, they do it...
At least that one had an ATST in
it. They do it everywhere. Every show has to have this kind of narrative where you teach the villagers to band together against the outlaw. They don't know how much power they actually have until the lone stranger walks into town. I'm just like, oh my God, really?
So just to provide a little bit of context, like, Ben is, we learn in this episode, a pacifist, which is not surprising because I feel like Sam Beckett was also a pacifist. And
well, he wasn't afraid to throw a punch.
That's true. Or a roundhouse. Like the Sam Beckett roundhouse is legendary. But Ben doesn't even want to fire a gun. And so the one thing I felt was kind of interesting in the interplay between him and Addison, whom he does remember in this episode as his significant other, is that she's ex-military. She absolutely has a different perspective on this and decides to teach him to shoot, which he doesn't do very well at. But at least there's one sheriff's deputy who doesn't leave town who is more or less a crack shot. But it doesn't change the fact that Ben's kind of left in a situation where he has to either learn to fire a gun or most likely perish in a gunfight. Now, there are a lot of colorful-ish characters in this town. A couple in particular that I think are worth noting are the grandfather and the grandson who is the town doctor. And doctor is in quotes. I don't really think he's an actual doctor.
I was going to say, and what makes them interesting?
That we learn a little bit about Ben through them in terms of his journey to the U.S. They're the ones that kind of inform who Ben is in the past.
Oh, I see.
Each episode so far has given us a little nugget like that.
Yeah.
But that's the nugget in this one. When I say nugget, I mean like it is smaller than a wonton in the soup that the doctor's grandfather serves Ben.
Yeah. Remind me, how did they use the cook's talent to capture the bad guys? You know, everybody has a specific talent that they didn't know that they had that they could use as a...
Wasn't he an explosives expert?
No, that was the drunk. No, he was the trapper. He was the fur trapper.
He was the fur trapper, and the drunk does literally nothing during that fight, like except stand up and laugh and hoot and holler like a town drunkard would do.
Well, he did drag one of them away.
You're right.
You know what? Like I said, to me, this barely merits any kind of discussion. Like, I've seen it so many times, and like I said, that Mandalorian episode is the one where I finally decided this is so boring.
Enough is enough.
It's enough. Yeah, it's so boring. Like the last time it was done well was A Bug's Life.
Yeah, Mandalorian was like, let's do this, but this time it's humid.
Yeah.
Yeah, good.
You know, I can't really. I don't. Can I fault people? Yeah, I can fault them. Yeah, there are other things.
They know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
Everybody's trying to ape Kurosawa.
There's other things you can do with a Western story. There are tropes that you love to see, but that one is not one that I'm... You know, there were interesting things that we learned about Ben, and not to say this story didn't serve any purpose. It was fine. But I think the greater cause to episode 5 was this 2022 storyline with the government oversight. That, like you said, kind of plants the seeds to something a little more interesting to me.
Sure.
Outside of, again, the big reveal.
Which we'll get there.
Yeah.
I did want to mention one other thing. Of course, the Seven Samurai, Magnificent Seven sort of context is pretty obvious. But the ending of this episode reminded me of a different movie.
Okay.
Because the way this whole thing ends, without Ben having fired a shot, is that this guy McDonough is trapped in a steel cage.
Oh, like, is that a Mission Impossible thing?
It's Mission Impossible 6, right? Like or 5, was it? 5. Mission Impossible Rogue Nation.
Right, 5.
That ends just like Mission Impossible Rogue Nation, with just a pissed off guy in a cage.
Yeah.
Which I thought, oh, well, that's cute.
Yeah, I mean, it was... Honestly, I wish I had more to contribute in that conversation, but I'm just like... I was kind of disappointed by their efforts there.
I did feel like the final scene where Ben tells the group that there's a copper mine nearby and that telephones are going to be a big deal.
Ooh, the talkie box.
That was really Quantum Leapy.
Yeah, that was cute.
That was a moment that would have fit right into the final moments of a Sam Beckett. That was a cute little moment that was completely overshadowed by what happened next.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Let's go back to 2022 and talk about Team Quantum Leap's encounter with the Congresswoman.
Okay. I feel like the writers decided that they needed to show us how interesting Jen is.
She turned into a character this week. And the thing I made a note of that I thought, oh, Nate probably laughed at this line.
Okay.
Was when the Congresswoman wants to interview everybody individually. And of course, you know, like they don't have time to get their stories straight with each other, which is played humorously in the scene with Addison.
Yeah, that was fun. The way she was in that interview reminded me of A Few Good Men.
Oh, yes. Yes.
You know, if there are any details that you feel like I may be missing, feel free to offer up.
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
When she sits down with Jen, she says to Jen that she's particularly fascinated in Jen's profile. And I'm like, that's really hilarious because Nate has been profoundly not particularly fascinated in Jen's profile for the last 4 weeks, right? So what can you tell us about Jen? That's so interesting.
I mean, how did you take that?
I have 3 letters for you.
Okay.
CSI. Like it felt like a CSI character wandered into my show and was played by Ming-Na Wen.
You know,
that's what I feel like. That's my impression of Jen.
Honestly, any character. When I say they tried to tell us she was interesting, it's like in the most boring way.
Right.
Are you kidding? Oh, she's a reformed criminal that the leader of the project really saw something in and trusts implicitly. A former hacker. Turned good. It's just like, really?
Who's by the book now? Can we
just let her go?
I will tell you, the hairs on my neck, the hairs on my neck stand up every time a primetime series uses the word hacker. I'm like, here we fucking go again. You know, because hackers on primetime series, even shows I love, are just like, is this what you think these people do? Is this what you think this is
something
like?
With cryptocurrency, right? Too.
Yeah.
Like, that's not going to age well.
How long was she in prison? Like, cryptocurrency's been around for a decade, maybe?
Yeah. Oh, my God. I just thought of all the things to try and do with her. Could you be any less creative? Like,
she's got a Wookiee life debt with magic, though. So I think that might come into it.
I don't care, Brian. I just don't care. Can we just... I feel bad for the actress, how much I want her to not be on that show.
Yeah, I think the scenes with her in this episode in particular are the writers kind of saying, yeah, we're not really sure.
What does she bring to the team?
Diversity.
And still, what is she... Yeah, well...
I mean...
They've got that in spades, honestly.
I don't think we've talked about that, but this is really like an exceptionally diverse cast for like a major network show. Who's the main white guy?
Yeah, absolutely.
Spoilers, there isn't one. You know?
Yeah.
Nothing really. Not one without a catch, because
not one at all.
Mason Alexander Park.
Well,
is a they them and delightful and non-binary and like it's not. You don't have your traditional man on this show, and I actually kind of love that about it.
It's not something that's obviously missed either.
Right.
You're right. We went 5 episodes without even talking about it because it's not a vacancy. It's just like, oh, yeah, you know what? There's no white dude. No cis white dude, whatever. It's also not like they're jamming it down your throat, really.
Yeah.
If you're a go woke, go broke crowd or whatever.
Can I just, and I want to just pause here to recognize Mason Alexander Park's social media.
I'm unfamiliar.
Every week I see at least one person that's like, tried to watch New Quantum Leap until I found out non-binary person's on it, and Mason Alexander Park is just like, bye, like every single time. to those people, because it's like, I think you might have missed the entire point. It's when people complain about Star Trek for being political or things like that, or as I say in every episode at some point or another, I really appreciate Mason Alexander part.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Who, speaking of which, kind of blows it this week in the interview with the Congresswoman. They try their best to technobabble their way out of all of it.
Yeah.
And again, a really funny moment where the Congresswoman's like, that sounds very complicated.
It's just the way I talk.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know that it's necessarily Ian's fault. I feel like she already knew.
She says, yeah.
The way the numbers worked out, whatever the power consumption was, apparently is completely in line with what Ben had presented as the power usage for the Quantum Leap accelerator. And she was trying to get something out of Magic's team. And of course, our head of security brought blackmail material to Magic because she thought that'd be a good idea.
Hey, well, obviously, they aren't really aware of the state of the world, because what does blackmail matter?
Yeah, seriously.
Like, give me what you got. So the thing about the blackmail plot, what Jen found about the Congresswoman is that she was involved in a car crash that claimed the life of her brother.
Mm-hmm.
And unbeknownst to the people in the aftermath, the Congresswoman was the one driving the car. The story was that her brother, who had died in the accident, was the one driving. It sort of absolved her of any direct responsibility with his death.
Right.
That was the big, juicy bit.
Right. Shades of Ted Kennedy.
Yeah, very much. And what Magic ultimately does with that information, I gotta admit, it surprised me. Like I expected this show to take the easy route. It's twisted in a way that is very Quantum Leap.
Yeah.
And
could present problems for them in the future.
Yes, that's the seed, I think, it's gonna germinate one way or the other. And I think the writers are keeping their minds open with regards to which way it goes.
Right.
I think renewal matters a lot for this show in terms of which way that ultimately goes.
Yeah, that kind of feels like a thread that they could leave loose if things had to tie up.
Yeah, so Magic says to her that Ben's time travel could result in them saving her brother from the car accident. What if you never get in that car?
Right.
He says to her. And I thought, wow, that's cool. But wait a minute. And then Ian immediately is like, the project doesn't work like that. We can't just pick where to go.
Right.
Now we, the fans, kind of know better than that at this point, because in the final episode of the original series, it is revealed that Sam does have control over where he goes and when.
And this show also, they've made mention a couple of times that Ben has a goal and end destination. So,
right. So
he
somehow,
supposedly is on some manner of trajectory, but it probably does not involve the car accident that the senator was involved in. So they don't claim to think it's random. But then they were also very confused that he was in the 1880s or 1870s. Like,
yes.
Are they going to be
confused?
Yeah. Are they going to be confused or not?
Everybody is taking this in stride, is I guess what I mean. The notion that this kind of violates the tenets of Quantum Leap and that he can leap out of his own lifetime, because he's done it at least twice already, is...
when we do get to episode 6, they address that pretty well.
They do, yes. Yeah. But speaking of the bouncing around and the trajectory and what have you, let's get to the big juicy part.
Bonkers! Are you kidding me?
Wild shit. So just a recap for us. I think since the very first episode of this, we've been talking about Lothos and Evil Leapers and
you
like,
were
what
on
if.
point, my friend. You were absolutely on point from the beginning.
I think that's like, wow. Just wow. So at the final moments of this episode, just as everything has come together, just as Ben has relayed that the telephone will be a huge success and save the town, there's a guy maybe 2 or 3 scenes earlier where Ben is in the town bar drinking heavily, and he says something really funny to Addison. He's like, not my body. And he just keeps drinking, which I thought was kind of funny.
Yeah, that's cute. Yeah.
But as he's leaving, this dude that's sitting at an adjacent table kind of gives him the side eye, and the camera lingers on this guy. And
for a second.
Fuck's this guy? Who's this guy?
Yeah.
Well, at the end of the episode, he grabs Ben's arm, spins him around, and says, you shouldn't have come here, Ben. Right.
Stop following me.
Yeah, stop following me. You've made a serious miscalculation coming here, he says.
Yeah.
Well, who the hell is this guy? He calls him Ben. He knows.
From the year 2022.
From the year 2022. Ben's
Yeah.
song from the year 2022. And then, of course, Ben leaps. And that's it. That's
Yeah.
all we get.
Yeah.
And like, what a cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
The way that you and I have managed to bring this, we save it for the recording. But I swear I picked up my phone and I thought, you know what? I can't. I was ready to just. Because we made a joke of this, that there would be evil leapers. And I'll admit, even at the time, listeners, we have since seen episode 6 as well. But even at the time, I didn't really buy that it was an evil leaper, just by virtue of the fact that he could recognize Ben. Whereas the evil leapers that were presented in the original show, they weren't cognizant of each other until they touched.
Right. So that was one of the very first things. That was, okay, so he touches Ben.
Yeah.
And there's no moment of morphing. Like, who we see is who we see throughout. Like, we see him in the bar. He looks the same as when he touches Ben later. That is explained further in episode 6. So there is no morphing. This is this person as he appears.
Right. And this person was aware of the fact that it was Ben's song from 2022, which in the past, these mysterious evil leapers, they weren't even aware of Sam or that anybody would be out there doing good, as far as I could tell. They were as surprised to hear about that as Sam was to hear about the fact that there are people going around ruining people's lives.
So the one thing I would say about the evil leapers is that it seemed pretty obvious that this was a grind for them. Like, this was a gig that they were doing.
Yeah.
And there was very little passion to it. There was very little mystery in it for them. They were much more accepting of their roles.
You know what's funny about that? I don't mean to cut you off, but what was really funny about those evil leapers is obviously it's just, the reversal of Sam's mission, right?
Sure.
But you can put this sort of ethereal mystery character in charge of Sam's leaping. Like, you don't have to say that it's God. They say God, they say time, they call it fate, and all of these things that if you're not religious, you don't have to buy into the fact that it's a man in a robe with a long beard.
It's the Force, but for quantum leap.
Yeah, exactly. And Ziggy and Al are just products of the fact that Quantum Leap had been hijacked by this benevolent character, right? So it's extremely humorous to me to then try and put those same rules into Lothos, and like the evil leaper also has a hologram that has a supercomputer and a hand link, and you think, who is the evil force behind this?
Yeah.
And it leaves me wondering, what does the devil need with a supercomputer?
There was. Yeah, that's really funny. Yeah, good Star Trek 5.
Yeah, exactly. What does God need with a starship, and what does the devil need with a Ziggy or a Lothos?
There is an episode of the original series where it's implied, whether it's a hallucination or whether it really happened, that Sam meets the devil.
Yes.
The devil having appeared. It's a really funny reveal. So in that reveal is that Al, the entire episode, has been Satan.
Yeah.
Posing as Al, because Al comes out of the door to the imaging chamber in like the third act, and it's like, oh, Sam, we couldn't find you. It's like, whoa, what's going on? And then there's two Als suddenly, and one of them has like glowing red eyes or whatever, and is like, oh, he's the devil.
Isn't that kind of, doesn't something happen at the end that kind of plays it off like maybe that hadn't really happened?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
It's definitely played off.
Another thing you can kind of explain away,
much like the "Is God a Bartender" in the last episode.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like to think of it as a God leaping him around.
Sure.
I prefer to think of it as a force situation, like you were talking about. But when you talk about an evil leaper, I just picture the devil being like, let's build this computer so that we can have a hologram that can talk to our evil Satanist person. That, like, are they demons? Like, what is going on?
How
does that mix with technology?
I feel like it's a corporate thing. Like, I feel like the Evil Leapers are a corporate thing. And
those are the privatized Leapers.
Right.
Right.
The other thing I always felt, and we'll probably discuss this more as we get into episode 6, was that wherever the Evil Leapers originated from, it was beyond the starting point of Project Quantum.
Okay.
Like, it was beyond the year 1999, and the Evil Leapers were coming back.
Is that something that you put together as headcanon, or is there some kind of...
That's always been my headcanon, because
Okay.
it didn't make any sense for there to be a second Sam Beckett out there who could develop all of this simultaneously. I guess it could be like, what is that theory that cultures around the world all developed the wheel the same goddamn week, even though they didn't talk to each other, you know, that sort of thing?
I think about those in terms of like the bow and arrow.
Yeah,
like,
but I don't think Quantum Leap is like that. Time travel could possibly be like that.
Right. Yeah, I agree. But I feel like I kind of derailed this because he recognized Ben, and there seemed to be something else involved there. He thought he was being followed.
Yeah.
And he wasn't there to do anything particularly evil. Actually, we don't know why he was there or what he was doing.
Yeah. So a couple things about that. One is that one of the original theories I had was that the current version of Project Quantum Leap and what Ben was doing was instigating the Evil Leaper program himself. So maybe that other Leaper is the good guy. But 2,
maybe that other Leaper has Janice as a hologram and we just didn't see her.
Yeah. Very possible.
Almost probable, I would think.
Yeah, I think that's high up there. But the other thing I immediately thought about was, has this guy been in other episodes? And we just didn't look for him. So now I have to go back and watch the first 4 episodes of the show looking for this dude. Because if I were the showrunner, I absolutely would have planted that dude in the background in a few scenes.
Yeah. Just
like who's that little cartoon dude on She-Ra back in the day? Like, you'd have to find him in the middle of the episode somewhere.
Yeah, right.
I really want him to be there, and maybe I want it too much, but
yeah, just there in the background, giving him the side eye or something.
Because if you're stop following me implies that this isn't the first time he's seen Ben.
Yeah, it'd be more of a "what are you doing here" thing rather than a "stop following me" thing.
Yeah,
right.
Look, dude, knock it off, you know.
Yeah, right, exactly. One of the other things about episode 5, they mentioned hosts. They mentioned the hosts, and Ben makes a mention of having never slept. And Addison says, well, if it's any consolation, your hosts have, right? And
yeah,
you have to assume then the hosts are there in a waiting room just taking naps, I guess. And
we have been on the waiting room. The biggest mystery for the show for us has not been what is Janice doing.
It's been
not like who's this other Leaper guy. It has been where's the waiting room?
Where's the waiting room?
And the funny thing is, like, there was a moment in this episode where I had the exact opposite thing where I'm like, well, I think they just closed the door on the waiting room. And that moment came when Addison shows up with almost no information about Diego de la Cruz. Has nothing on him except an obituary. Which tells me, once again, and we've talked about this with regards to other Leapies so far in this series, they don't have the option to interview the person in the waiting room.
Right.
To figure out who they are, where they're from, anything like that. The only information they have about Diego de la Cruz comes from after he would be aware of his personal history, right?
Right.
So I was like, well, is that it? Because you could just walk in there and ask him, bro.
Right. Do you still feel that way? I mean, they mentioned the hosts have been sleeping. Like, how else?
Maybe they were sleeping before he leaped into them and their bodies are energized, is what she means.
I don't know. I think it's a subtle way of trying to bring that in.
Maybe they sleep the entire time he sleeps.
Just the fact that she's mentioning what the host has been doing, even if it's just that they've been sleeping, implies that she knows
Magic's
something.
Story, though. It would be consistent with Magic's description of leaping, where he was just sort of out of commission and he came to, right?
Well, I've got a terrible track record on predictions and guesses, but I really feel like they're referring to the host that's in 2022. The reason I say that is because I've got another note here about how steeped in lore the 2022 story is.
Mm-hmm.
Who is this show for? Because I wonder if you're a casual viewer or have never seen the original series, how much of this really makes sense? If you're showing the hand link, like, that's for us, but that means nothing to a 20-something. You know, so like,
Yeah.
it seems like that story is so steeped in what came before that they couldn't possibly have left this other gaping hole open. I just don't see it. And
look, if they seriously bring the evil leapers into this, but don't mention the waiting room,
right?
I mean, that's yeah.
I feel like they're going to tiptoe around that evil leaper thing. I didn't take that to mean he was out there doing nefarious things.
Right, because I feel like if he was, he would have shot the granddaughter at the last minute. And then Ben would have just left, right? Or something upsetting the world that Ben had left behind
right.
would have happened right before Ben left. And we would have just been like, what the hell just happened? You know?
Right.
But that isn't what happened. So the question is, what did that guy do? What was he doing there? You know?
There was some other kind of agenda, and we don't know what it is. And it's just bonkers. It's bonkers. I couldn't believe it. Just amazing that they even went there.
Because of that last moment, it's the money shot.
Yeah, like, it's unreal. It just blows my mind. When we were talking about evil leapers, I just thought it was a joke the whole time. And then we talked about, oh, she's building an imaging chamber. What if she creates Lothos? You know, jokes all along, but just keeps going that way.
I want to get a hashtag started. Lothos lives.
Something.
That's a hashtag for like 5 people in the world.
That's right. You and me, so 3 others. Yeah, justice for Lothos.
I bet if we brought up Lothos to Scott Bakula, he'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, right. I wonder if Donald Belisario
might not know.
You'd be like, oh yeah, I was off working on something else by that point. The writing was on the wall. Those episodes, they really smacked of desperation.
Yeah, I would say so.
But here, I don't read it the same way. Or do I? Are they just pulling out all the stops because they're like, we got to keep this on the air? Or like, what's the motivation here? Do they actually have a story?
Again, I think going back to what we were kind of talking about in the very first episode, I think the expectations of a modern audience is different than what you might have had in 89 or 90 when the original Quantum Leap was running. It's not enough just to have a story of the week where everything is resolved at the end and move on to the next thing. It's not the next big thing. It's just you get that little stinger at the end of every episode with the beginning of the next leap, and it was a cool way to kind of motivate you to come back. But that's not enough anymore. Now it needs to be like someone shot in the final moments of the show, and then you're like, I gotta tune in next week to find out what happens, because this is the same story, right?
Right.
Maybe more than any cliffhanger they've done so far, episode 5's cliffhanger is like, I dare you not to come back next week.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no question. I mean, I was ready to see it.
Yeah, I think we can probably leap ourselves over to episode 6 here.
Yeah, well, so when episode 6 came, who accepted the nudge?
The date was October 17th, 1989. Ben has leaped into John Harvey, a name as dull as the man himself, it would seem. By all accounts, he is not the greatest dude, as Ben describes him. Evidenced by the fact that when we first leap in, John is sitting across the table from his wife, Naomi, who is asking for a divorce at the worst possible time. First of all, they're in a sports bar.
Or the best possible time?
No. Maybe. It's Game 3 of the World Series is about to start. And this is the San Francisco-Oakland World Series of 89. And Ben quickly realizes that Game 3 doesn't happen because of the 89 San Francisco earthquake that is seconds away from happening.
Right.
The earthquake itself is not the centerpiece of the show. It happens in the first few moments, and the aftermath is what we're dealing with throughout, as John has to venture back to Oakland to save John's son, Jason.
Mm-hmm.
Meanwhile, Team Quantum Leap in 2022 pours all their resources into investigating just who the hell that guy was at the end of last week's episode, the other Leaper.
Which they coin
Leaper X.
Leaper X, yeah.
Leaper X, which I felt like was you ever watch The Flash, Nate?
Yes, I did. You're talking about the Grant Gustin CW show. Yeah, I watched the first few seasons.
It was a very Cisco Ramon moment where like Cisco every week on The Flash
yeah.
would be like, we're going to call this guy Captain Cold. And he would have to get the name to stick with the group, right?
Yeah.
Ian is kind of like serving as the Cisco Ramon in Quantum Leap this week because he's like Leaper X. And Magic's like, for the last goddamn time, I'm not calling him Leaper X. But
right.
by golly, they're calling him Leaper X for a minute.
For a minute. Yeah.
Yeah.
For
Until
a
they
minute.
find out who he is, which happens pretty quick in another really kind of funny moment.
Right. I really liked Ian in this episode. Episode
he
6.
got a lot of funny moments for them.
Yeah.
In this one.
And again, I think they tried to make me like Jen again.
Yes.
And I don't know how much I need to harp on that. She's everything they do with her is just another like nail in the coffin. I'm just like, did we finish our synopsis?
Yeah, that's
okay.
all I'm going to go on the synopsis because we're going to spend so much time talking about what Team Quantum Leap gets up to this week. But first, the leap to 1989.
Okay.
Very first thing I noticed is that John Harvey's wife, Naomi, is played by Jewel Staite, who played Kaylee Fry on Firefly, the engineer.
Then that was the engineer.
That was the engineer.
I didn't recognize her.
Of Serenity. Yep.
That was so long ago. She was such a kid during that show.
She was a kid, and she had that sort of baby face going, but she's a full-grown woman now, man.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess there is a callback to that. I did not recognize her, and I really enjoyed Firefly, but I'm not exactly a huge fan. Like, where they call themselves the brown coats, right?
Brown coats. I would not classify myself a brown coat. Whatever the brown coat equivalent is for Jewel Staite, the actress, that's probably what I.
Yeah, episode 6. I'm in a little different place talking about this episode because most of the time I'll watch Quantum Leap on a Tuesday and it has a moment to gestate. Unfortunately, going through some issues here in the household, my wife is suffering from COVID, as I mentioned off air.
Oh, yeah.
So things have been a little strained here. So I did not have a chance to watch that episode until tonight, just a few hours ago.
Okay, so this is really fresh.
So this is fresh to me, and I haven't had time to really let it sink in and give a critical thought to it so much as impactful thought. But the first note that I took down, they did not need that opening in 2022, where they immediately picked up where they left off. Who is Leaper X? What are they doing? And what's their motivation? And where are they? All this stuff, right?
They're basically rehashing the questions we've all had over the previous week.
Right, but I feel like it would have been so much more effective when Ben leaps in and absolutely paying no attention to the person sitting right across from him because he's looking everywhere for this guy.
For the guy.
Guy. Like, that's what he's like, who was that? Where is he? Is he here? What does he want? Does he see me? All of these things are the more important aspects because when Addison does show up in the Leap storyline, she just rehashes what they already said, which is like, we've got the team working on it. We've got several theories, one of which they might be a time traveler. And it was so much more interesting to me to watch Ben freak out a little bit. And then outside of that, I'll just preface that this is probably my favorite episode so far.
Okay, yeah. And that's really interesting.
Have not slept on it.
So, I don't know if you're aware of this, but this was the original pilot.
What?
Now I'm going to say that the script was reworked, obviously, because there are elements of it that would not have worked as a pilot episode, but the central San Francisco earthquake storyline was the original pilot for this series.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I mentioned that early on, that the pilot was not the pilot.
This was the pilot.
Oh, okay.
Which, I don't know, I kind of feel like I get you hit the ground running, the car chase, all that stuff we talked about in the first episode of this show. This episode and the story surrounding the leap felt so much more inherently Quantum Leap.
Yes.
To me. And if you take the context of him kind of showing up in this bar and looking around all confused and talking to her like he has no idea who she is, and then you think of it like, what if that was his first leap? And he legit doesn't know what the hell's going on? Like, you kind of look at it in a different lens, and I'm like, I kind of like that. That would have been a little bit more playful way to kind of kick things off.
Yeah. I feel like he would have been paying more attention to her talking to him than he was. I like the fact that he was so distracted by what had happened prior.
Yeah.
That's really very interesting. I can see the San Francisco earthquake backdrop being a very good backdrop for a pilot because it's an event that's long enough ago to be the past, but big enough for some of us to remember that, you know,
Yes,
I remember that. I'm a baseball fan, so I remember trying to watch that game and seeing that happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, maybe I wasn't watching the game because my Cubs got beat in the National Championship Series that year by the San Francisco.
Sore about it.
Yeah. But that's an interesting backdrop for a pilot, more so than the Hope Diamond, probably.
The Hope Diamond heist of the pilot we got, yeah.
Because that was a bad pilot. I mean...
It wasn't...
Looking back, 6 episodes in, we've done 5 podcasts. Be honest enough to say, I really feel like that was probably pretty bad.
For me, it's probably the weakest episode. For you, it's probably the second weakest episode. I'm just so disappointed
with what they decided to do with the West, and I'm so bored with that story. But it wasn't a bad episode of television. Like,
it was a fairly cut and dry, run of the mill quantum.
If you're not tired of A Bug's Life,
there's another one. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, if you're not tired of A Bug's Life or this storyline, then it's perfectly fine television. It wasn't bad. The pilot was arguably bad.
Yeah, that's the only episode I feel that deserves the audience score this show has of like
46%.
Yeah, right. Yeah. You know, it's like that one wasn't the best.
Right.
And so I wonder if it was just they needed something more action-centric.
It's gotten better each week, in my opinion.
I think it's become a show that I absolutely recommend fans and non-fans watch. Like, if you liked Quantum Leap back in the day, I'm like, you should probably be watching this, because there's probably a lot of stuff you'll be into.
Going back to something that you said in either the first or second episode of our podcast, which was to say it's hard to think of Quantum Leap as sci-fi and it's more of a drama. That's really hit with me. I've mentioned it twice since you did. This show is a time travel show. It's a time travel show, and they said that implicitly for this week.
Oh, yeah. They go full tilt into time travel.
Yeah, it's time travel, it's science fiction, and that's not what Quantum Leap was. It's what this show is. If this is how you're going to base your show, tell me what the rules are. And they basically sat down in the classroom and told us the rules.
They did that scene. Week. That's the scene that I love in time travel stuff, and I guess 96% of the public hates because they don't like being lectured or told how things work. I don't know. We got that scene from Ian where he starts to posit theories about how this has happened. I guess first, before we get to that, I guess I should mention that Jen has 3 theories. One, that a foreign government got a hold of Quantum Leap specs and replicated the project. 2, that a private company is behind it. Ian mentions Elon Musk or Zuck.
Yeah.
and someone else is using the Quantum Leap facility, but in the future.
Right.
And that's where we start to get into the timey-wimey stuff.
Yeah.
As the doctor would say, right? Because now you have to think...
Wait, would a doctor really say timey-wimey?
No, the doctor, not a doctor.
Oh.
Right?
Yeah, I don't watch that show.
So, I might have to start again after this past weekend. But the idea that time travel is not happening on this linear plane. It's a lot like 2022 is the baseline, right? Time travel was invented in 1995.
Right.
Time travelers can come back from points beyond that now because it's invented, right?
They can even come from hell.
No, as we've seen. Yeah. Love those. I want to picture it's like Satan from South Park, and he has to actually call like a computer tech to come out and
it's
fix
like
Lothos.
Legitimately Satan, though, isn't it? All right, I'm
Saddam
sorry. We're off
Hussein's
that.
there with him. But yes, so this idea that there might be a future leaper that is coming back.
Yeah.
And Ian posits at the end, like, what if we did this?
Yeah.
What if we set the events in motion that result in whoever this is coming back and meeting Ben in 1879?
Right.
And like, that's where we start to get to that cusp thing where it's like, oh boy, is the audience going to keep up with this?
Right.
You know, Because
Right.
I think it's fairly easy to understand because I have lived at multiple points historically for the last 4 decades. I understand how that works, right?
Yeah. Well, I
But
think Jen kind of shut all that down with her. I can't be concerned with what's going to happen in the future. Like, we have to proceed
right,
as we would today, you know?
yeah, and that's to me another seed. That's another seed we're planting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably going to bear fruit before that Congresswoman's brother does. But
Yes. Yeah. Who knows when that'll come back, if at all. A little ashamed of myself as I didn't even really consider the fact that it could be somebody using the project from the future. And when
yeah.
they said that, I was like, oh, shit. Yeah, it could. Well, that's pretty cool.
And it also, I think, is reinforced
Mm-hmm.
by taking us to this guy's house. So they find out that this guy is named Richard Martinez.
Yeah. Somehow they can look this guy up in the phone book, but they couldn't find Janice, who also just lived in the suburbs.
Right.
They
go to Martinez's house. His mom makes them dinner.
Yeah.
They open the door. They expect some hostile dude, and he's just like, "Oh man, when an admiral shows up on my porch, I'm in. Whatever you need me for, I'm in. This
Right.
is my duty.
Right.
I love this country." He's a real "I love America. I'm here to serve. This is the land of opportunity." He's like such a golly gee whiz Boy Scout.
Yeah.
And they leave thinking like, well, how does this guy turn into the guy that Ben met? But it underscores the fact that we don't really know the guy Ben met.
Right, exactly.
He seems angry, but maybe he's justified. Maybe what Ben's doing in the past is actually potentially dicking something up. So
the way he spoke in episode 5, he perceived Ben as a threat to something that he was trying to do.
right.
Did he say if you value your life or something?
He said, if you value your life, you need to stop following.
Right. So he could either be malevolent or perceive Ben as a threat. It kind of leads me to think the latter.
Can I toss a theory out here?
Yeah. Well, that's what we do here, isn't it?
All right. So the A plot, like I said, there are moments in every episode that sort of lead to these revelatory flashbacks with Ben. In episode 5, it's just, I remember my mom's cooking. We get a lot more of Ben's mom in this episode.
Yeah, that's the pilot coming through.
That's the pilot through line, right? Because it even has that moment that Sam Beckett gets at the end of the original pilot where he calls his dad on the phone. Right?
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
In this episode, right before he leaves, Ben tries to call his mother.
Yeah, but God doesn't let him have the conversation.
Of course. He's like, no.
But he let Sam have the conversation with his dad, but he didn't let Ben have the conversation with his mom. I actually thought about that.
So a line that really sticks with me here is that Ben recognized, like, all of this is him kind of understanding and coming to terms with how his mother died. He got very upset with her. She was mad because he was basically blowing his high school classes on purpose.
Right.
Because he felt like he wasn't in control of his own destiny, essentially. His mom harped that she had brought him to America solely for him to be successful, and he felt like she was limiting his potential in that. He gets angry with her, storms out of the house. She's crying. By the time he comes back, she's died of an aneurysm. So it's absolutely terrible. But Ben, when he's revealing all of this to Addison, who I think it's noteworthy, he had never told about this before at all.
Right.
He reveals this to Addison and says, but that was the moment that set me on the path to where we are now.
Yeah. And he kind of came to that realization too.
Yeah.
Not in a way that, like, oh, my Swiss cheese brain made me forget that this is why I joined Quantum Leap, but more in a sense of, you know what, now that I'm thinking about it, of course I'd join Quantum Leap, know, with this kind of tragic backstory that all superheroes have.
So here's my question. If given the opportunity to save his mother, does Ben do it?
Is that the point that he's trying to get to?
I'm thinking like, okay, when the Leaper says, if you value your life, you'll stop following. Mm-hmm. What is Ben's life? What if he's talking about his life as it was in 2022 or as it exists in that moment? What if Ben does something that alters history?
Right.
And this guy goes back to stop him from doing it.
Oh, yeah. Maybe this guy is threatening to go back and stop the inciting incident that brought Ben to Project Quantum Leap.
Yeah, like
Who knows?
maybe
Who
there's
knows? Yeah, that's
maybe there's something
interesting.
there. If that ends up being true, I am going to be. This is one of my favorite episodes of television ever. The episode we just saw. If all of those threads are connected in some way,
Mm-hmm.
I will be just blown away by episode 6 of Quantum Leap. As it is, probably my favorite episode so far. But I'd be super impressed with that.
I lean more towards the theory that they're coming up with in the show, which is to say, Ben may be cognizant of the fact that this guy is out there leaping around, and maybe Ben leaped because he was aware of this guy's activities. And because the other thing Ian said was that, maybe I had this backwards. He's actually trying to get to the future, right? And if their
Yes.
theory now, which seems proven by the fact that they went and talked to Martinez, is that he came from the future.
Right.
Or he will leap in the future. And who knows how Ben or Janice figured all that out, but the idea now kind of seems to be that Ben is trying to get towards the future rather than to the past, which speaks to what we were talking about a little earlier about Magic saying, well, you're not supposed to be able to do that. Right?
Right.
And Ian responds with a, well, can't do any of this until somebody does.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great moment.
So yeah, I think I kind of lean towards the theory that they're coming up with, that maybe he's actively trying to combat whatever Martinez is doing.
Mm-hmm.
How he's aware of something that hasn't happened yet becomes a mystery. But a really interesting mystery. Who doesn't love a good time travel story?
I mean, like, I guess there are people out there who don't, but I am a complete sucker for it. And the more complicated it is, and the more I have to think about the physics of it and how it all works, the more on the hook I am, like every single time. So
right, but if it tends to fall apart, do you then not like it?
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
My requirements with time travel stories are that whatever rules they establish, they have to play by those rules.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, that's fair.
There's a movie that came out a few years ago called About Time that had Domhnall Gleeson and Rachel McAdams in it.
Did not see it.
And it is about a guy who can time travel by stepping into a wardrobe. And he comes out in a different period.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, it is a little bit weird, but there's a moment about halfway through that movie. We're sitting there watching it, my wife and I, and she says, wait a minute. And I paused the movie and I said, did you see what just happened there? And she's like, I think so. I was like, the movie just broke its own rules. And it disrupted the narrative of the movie for my wife, who's not hyper attuned to this stuff. Conversely, have you ever seen the movie Primer?
I don't think so.
If time travel movies were a college curriculum, it would be like a 900 level course.
Okay.
It's like the master class of time travel stories. It's basically about two guys who invent time travel in their garage.
Okay.
It's a wild, wild movie. Anybody who's into time travel, I cannot recommend it enough.
Primer, you said.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's really something else. And it sets its rules and it plays by them. And when I say rules, I don't mean they have to be hyper specific. They can be very basic. Like, I think if Primer's a 900 level course, then Back to the Future 2 is like the intro to time travel, right? And
right.
I'm thinking specifically of the scene where Doc Brown illustrates how the alternate 1985 exists.
Sure.
It's very straightforward, and it's done with a visual aid. So,
right.
like, that point was a nexus point. We've split off from there. Okay,
right.
I get it. And the movie plays by those rules. It's not complicated, and it can have a lot of fun within that context.
Right.
That's all I ask. So if Quantum Leap ends up breaking its narrative in some point and doesn't have an explanation for it,
then they've lost Brian.
It's going to be hard to get me back. But one of the reasons the original Quantum Leap never bothered me that much, and we've talked about this, is that those rules were something they played pretty fast and loose with. All you needed to understand about Project Quantum Leap was the string metaphor that Al illustrates in the first episode.
Yeah.
Tie the ends together, ball the string up, the days of your life, touch out a sequence, boom, boom, boom.
Right.
Now, this new series obviously is taking a different angle. I think so far we've seen enough to know that they know what they're doing.
They seem to have a plan.
Yes.
I guess as I say that, my understanding is, and I didn't watch this show, but Lost appeared to have a plan. And we later found out that they never had a plan at all. And then they had to try and tie it all together.
Yeah, Lost is a little bit of a different beast. It was like a red herring salad. Like that's what Lost was.
Right.
But when it came to time travel, which is a part of Lost, that was very consistent. Like extremely consistent.
Well, yeah, somebody was explaining that show to me, trying to get me to watch it, and mentioned something about a polar bear on a tropical island, and I said no.
That's literally like the second episode. You're like, okay, I'm out, guys.
Yeah, I'm done.
Well,
no, I didn't even
explain.
I never even tried. I didn't turn it on. I didn't get into that show, but culturally speaking, people tend to point to that as something that was so many threads, so much just thrown on the wall to see what would stick, and then they couldn't tie it back together.
Yeah. I think they tie the big thing together, but there's so many threads left dangling that are, I won't even say they're left dangling, they are hastily tied up.
Okay. And you don't want to see that here.
I think they're dealing with a lot less. I feel like, we've got essentially, 3 storylines happening in 2022 right now. 2 of them might be the same one.
Right. Janice,
Martinez, and the Oversight Committee.
Yeah.
The immediate questions are regarding Janice and Martinez. And I think those will bear fruit soon enough.
I think those two have to be connected.
So, Sam, with the exception of one extremely notable episode, sees his reflection in every leap within the first couple minutes.
Yeah, that was interesting.
I don't think Ben saw his reflection in this episode.
No.
At any point. In fact, the first time we see the person that Ben has leaped into is in a family picture.
Oh, I even missed that. I thought it was at the very end with the reflection in the car window.
I thought the reflection in the car window was really cool. Like,
yeah,
I
it
thought
was.
That's such a neat thing. I wish he had seen his reflection earlier. And that was kind of tying it. Now you see him with his son, and you have this image of that family. Maybe not restored, but they're going to be okay,
Right.
But as it is, that's the only time we see John Harvey in real time as Ben. And I think it does a little disservice because it's hard to imagine why Naomi would be so hostile and wanting to break up with Ben Song, who is the only version of this character we know.
Yeah.
And then the second you see John Harvey in the photograph, you're like, that schlub landed Kaylee Fry from Firefly? It's like, of course. Girl, get out and do your thing,
Yeah, okay.
Treat yourself.
Yeah. Ben continues to say, well, I can't be here to save their marriage. This guy clearly is deserving of divorce.
Right.
Like this guy's clearly the worst husband ever. And I'm like, why? Like, we don't know that. Why do you think that? Are you just, there's no evidence to suggest that this guy's some kind of a-hole, is there?
Yeah, I mean, maybe if 5 minutes before Ben leaped in, Naomi was like, we need to talk. Can you meet me at a sports grill?
Yeah.
like, I gotta watch the game. Come on down.
Yeah, well, we've never seen a host before the leap.
I would have loved for the waiting room to have been an element in this episode, and someone had just come out like, who ruined our toilet? It's like, oh yeah, that's John Harvey. He went in there and just let it rip.
Yeah, well, you say that, but that is the second time they mentioned the host.
Yep.
So, like I was saying, I kind of held it back when we were talking about episode 5, but they do it again in episode 6.
Yeah.
And they talk about the host as a person that I feel like they must be cognizant of, like he has to be somewhere. I'm beginning to believe that the waiting room is going to come up, and you are beginning to doubt it even further.
We'll see.
Yeah,
but like if somebody leaped into me and they were like, well, you got a couple days, you bet your ass I'm sleeping.
Yeah, because there's nothing else in that room if it's of course, there's no aesthetic from 1995 that is also present in 2022. But the waiting room that was there in 1995 was just a blank white room with a table in the middle, right? I mean, it was all white. I think the walls were lined with a bench, and then there was a reflective table in the middle so that they could see what they look like.
Which is really helpful. Great. Let them know what you're doing. Tell them as much as possible.
Yeah.
Speaking of, though, aesthetics from 1995, there is a nice little moment in here where Addison punches a handler.
Mm-hmm.
And
I did. I made note of that, too.
And so we've been waiting for her to punch a hand link. She finally does. She gets an older version of the hand link. Is that hand link Al's original hand link?
No.
You've been watching those first episodes. I can't remember.
It's not. No, it is not. The hand link that we all remember that Janice has in her possession.
That multicolored, blocky kind of.
Yeah, they call that the squished up gummy bears.
Yes.
Right? And then the other one is referred to as the crescent moon, if I'm not mistaken. It's like a cell phone, basically, but it's got this kind of cut moon shape out the side of it, and that area is clear. So...
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, so that's...
And that was the one I was like, I don't know. I can't quite remember what that looked like, but maybe that's the same device.
Right. He has that at least into the first couple episodes of season 2 now, and he's still got that one.
Oh, yeah?
Again, I if somebody knows something different, tweet at me. But that's my understanding. Going back to my days on the Sci-Fi Channel message boards, that's kind of how they referred to them, as the gummy bears and then the crescent moon. But perhaps there's one in the middle. Visuals aside, he's got the recognizable, audible squeaks and cries of the old hand link when she swats it.
Yep. Need way more of that.
Yeah. She swatted it in episode 5 too. But yeah, she switches them out episode 6, and now she's got an older one that'll talk to us. Maybe with some personality. We'll see.
Let's hope so. The
other moment I don't want to miss is the facial recognition software. Great moment in that scene.
Oh, God, yeah.
I loved it when Ian was talking about, this could take weeks. There are like trillions of files that Ziggy is running through. This could take forever. And then just as that's, left his lips, they get a match.
Right.
And he's like,
ding.
How did you do that? Magic. Because things seem to work out just by his being there. Like that
he's got the same mutant powers as Domino.
She's the luckiest person or something.
Wasn't what Domino was lucky, like Longshot was pretty lucky. They had a few luck-based characters, I think, running around the X-Men there.
But the thing with Magic in his introduction in the original series was things seem to go well when you're around.
Yep.
That was his thing, and that's why they called him Magic. And things seem to go well when he's around. He just happens to be there, and he's like, it was so great. I really liked that moment.
It was a terrific moment.
Yeah, I laughed out loud at that.
I also liked how it played against kind of what your expectations might be for the show up to this point. Like, yeah, maybe they feed that face in there, and it is next week before we get another morsel with this thread.
Right, which would be more like realistic.
The show is like, nope, we're not wasting time with that. And here's a little character moment. I wonder if there's a page in the show Bible that just like magic, plot convenience are like in all caps right next to each other. Like, but see, don't forget.
Yeah, exactly. That's what it is, right? It's plot convenience, but not because of the way it's presented.
Right. Because this is who that character is. Yeah. It makes perfect sense. It's not like a Deus Ex Machina. It's like no, this is just perfectly consistent with the world we've created and the character that we've got.
Yeah, somehow things go right when Magic's around. And the way Ernie Hudson delivers that one word, just does it perfectly. Magic, yeah. I enjoyed that moment so much I had to write that down and say let's make sure we talk about that. But the introduction of Martinez with his mom trying to feed them and cook for them is like an immediate. This is a good guy, comes from a good family situation. Like that's a good way to say
he is one of the least sketchy dudes I have ever seen in a TV show ever.
Yeah.
Like if he walked into Mayberry, for God's sakes, he would fit right in.
Maybe not Mayberry.
Well, I mean, no, they'd probably run him out of town in Mayberry. They'd be like, we don't cotton to your tattoo.
That's right. Maybe by Matlock. I don't know. But yeah, there's the only component though is there's a very much a yes sir, no sir, whatever you need situation, right? He's liable to be manipulated in a trusting sense of the military and the American government. Right.
And
so he's just ready to do what he's told to do.
And he has a high respect for officers that outrank him.
Right.
So if he is involved with Janice, what if whatever she's cooking up started with Al?
Wow. Yeah.
Because Al still outranks Magic.
He doesn't seem cognizant of Al at the time that Magic shows up at the door, and Al's already gone.
Yeah.
I don't think that there's not a scenario where those two would have interacted, and if they had, he's already passed on.
Maybe.
It feels more like this guy is ready to serve. He's ready to... I think the thing that, like, when he shows up at the door and says, I'm ready for a mission, regardless of what it is, he may not be sketch, but he's not very discriminating either. What is he prepared to do? You don't have any questions about what you're about to do.
Yeah,
You trust these people so implicitly. This person that has just knocked on your door, and because he flashed an admiral badge at you, you're ready to go do whatever this man asks you to do.
I mean, we've got people running for public office flashing police badges left and right. I mean, like, who knows?
Right down here in my neck of the woods, folks.
Oh
yep.
God.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, that's a really good point. Maybe this guy is a psycho.
A psycho or just naive?
A little gung ho.
A little too naive to be.
Yeah.
You know. But if you're implying that his military service is what led to his leaping in the future, then his mission is maybe not connected to Janice. I mean, how would he'd have to fall out of favor with the military in order for him to go with a rogue metaphysicist. What did she do? She was
right.
Like right now she's just like right now she's just sketch villain woman, you know, like with multiple evil hideaways. So I don't know how the two of them would fall together. They almost certainly have to, though. Seem like two threads.
It seems like it. Yeah. Here's the only other theory I've got.
All right, throw me another one.
The congressional committee takes control of the project, and the congresswoman from episode 5 is like, they still haven't saved my brother. I'm going to send you back to do it. And so he's actually bouncing around through time with the sole purpose of trying to leap into the point where he could save her brother from that car accident.
And for a little while, he's just hanging out in that bar.
Right. He's
in
just
1887.
I was like, when do I get there? You know?
Yeah. But it doesn't. But wouldn't he also have to do something good in order to leap?
I guess so. Yeah.
And what's he there to do?
It's a low threshold, maybe, for certain people. Maybe he got the town drunk sober.
Not by the end of that episode.
No, definitely not.
But yeah, I mean, there are episodes of the original series where Sam is essentially just getting a cat out of a tree. Like literally getting a cat out of a tree and then leaping. So, you know, who knows?
That cat became a Nobel Prize winning physicist.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's what Jason, the son that he saves in this episode, goes on to save thousands of lives.
Becomes like a structural engineer and is inspired by his experience in the earthquake to make stronger buildings. Like,
right.
That was another thing that I felt like the consequences of that leap are so explicitly stated.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like episode 5 where it's like the whole town came together. It's like one person, one child's life was impacted, and look at how
exactly. Exactly. Yes.
And I was like, that to me is another case of this would have made a good pilot. That part of the mission statement, it's been a little fuzzy throughout, I think. It is so explicitly and like succinctly stated.
It would have made a good pilot, but I'm glad it's the episode that it is instead.
Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. So the big moment at the end, you know, Ben calls his mom. just hears her voice. I think the theme of this episode is just call your moms.
Yeah.
You know, that's the message. Stop what you're doing. Call your mom.
Call your mom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know Jen wanted to call her mom, so we know Jen has a mom, and they have a relationship. Maybe we'll get to that.
Maybe.
Before they go watch The Housewives. Housewives are mentioned again.
The Housewives. They're going to watch The Housewives again. I'm alarmed by the fact that we have now had Real Housewives mentioned just a fraction less on this show than Janice Calavici.
I promise not to put a clip in there on this episode, guys. I'll leave it alone. I promise.
Nobody wants to hear that.
Wait for it.
Know.
Wait for it.
Oh, boy.
No, I'm kidding. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to mention near the end of this episode is that Ian again brings up the gravity-assisted navigation through time. That I'm like, and it made even less sense this time.
I feel like the
he has
idea
to
behind it is just like you're
Let me
spinning.
cut you off. Let me catch you off a second. Just because the gravity-assisted navigation is speeding him up to get to the future. Like, he's not traveling at any particular speed.
No, he just goes from place to place.
Right. He's just like hopping around. Like, what are they talking about?
Again, I think this is a thing that would make sense if he was like spiraling out and you could register it by the dates he was ending up. Like, let's say the first leap is like 1985, and then the second leap is like 76, and then like the next leap is 10 years later, and then 10 years out, and 10 years out, or it was somehow curving back around to like 85, and then it's 2030, and then it's, 72, and then it's 2040, and then and you're just kind of like oscillating back and forth.
We mentioned this before, Technobabble with Star Trek. They can talk about matter antimatter conversion and Heisenberg compensators and all these things that are just like, yeah, these don't exist, but you get the idea,
Right.
Like, whereas this is like a thing that exists but seems completely unrelated to time travel as I would understand it. Somebody get Neil deGrasse Tyson on the phone.
Oh God, don't do that. He ruins the fun in everything. Did you see how he spent like a month on Twitter just blasting Top Gun Maverick? And I'm like, all right, he's officially done.
Well, okay. I don't know. If that does make sense and I'm just missing it, I wish somebody would explain it a little better to me. Because it doesn't seem to make any sense, and I'd rather you just give me some gobbledygook that I'll never understand. But yeah, but like I said, this is a time travel show and not a
drama series.
Not. Well, see, I was about to say that, but
it is.
It is, but it
definitely is. It's This Is Us if Sterling K. Brown was from the future.
Okay.
She might have been. I don't know. I didn't really watch that show.
Yeah, okay, good. I haven't seen that myself. The 2022 storyline is one I'm a little more invested in, but God, I was about to say that, but they've kind of got me on both ends.
Yeah, I mean, with the right subject and the right sort of story in the leap, I felt like this is the sort of smaller scale, tighter knit kind of leap story where it's just about these three people.
Right.
Than we've gotten in other episodes, like the Jewel Heist episode or the Old West episode. It's a little bit more sprawling in those cases.
Sure.
So it just felt more quantum leaping.
Yeah, I think the fact that they tied it so nicely to Ben's experiences.
Ben's experience was really emotional. Like,
yeah,
it was intense. Like, it's actually awful, so
yeah. And Ben's a great character. I really have grown to like him.
Yep.
Addison and her explanation that the fact that he's open and vulnerable in this Swiss cheesed brain state is making her fall in love with him even further.
Yeah, that was really kind of sweet. And it makes sense because he's trying to latch on to as much as he can, right? Like when he's telling her about his memories, it's as much for him as it is her. So it's kind of this it's like she's discovering himself for the first time.
Yeah.
It does sort of lend itself to a deeper love. I mean, like, Nate, you're a father. I'm a father. And there's something just magical about having a person in your life who is discovering things for the first time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And when you already have an emotional connection with that person that's so deep as Addison Ben's, and it's romantic, and you're kind of going through that experience, what must that be like, right? Like it makes sense that it would kind of be painted in this way, where she's like, I can't even really explain it. It's like I'm falling deeper in love with it. These are the moments that I'm glad the show has gotten to, and that I needed, and I feel, I feel great about what's the percentage on that? 80% of the characters on the show. So
you haven't really reflected my disdain for this character. You just sort of seem to dodge it. Are you on board with Jen, or are you where are you with this character?
I have not formed an opinion about it.
Okay, mine is set.
like I said early on, like it's in the pilot, it's like they needed a security guard. They realized they needed a security guard. We got to write this character. Now we're like, we're on the hook with this character, but there's a moment somewhere down the road, but right now it's just it's not
yeah
clicking.
And when you talk about the end of this episode, as they tie everything together and Addison is having this conversation and opening up to someone, imagine it as Ian, and it already works better.
Right
You know, like, who is Jen? She's like super serious and cynical, but then this episode she's kind of jokey and wants to like use little cowboy figurines to like explain to us the imaging chamber. She throws out a name of somebody else on the project,
but we don't know who that guy is. He just collects dolls. Like I automatically want to know more about this guy.
Yeah, or not. You know, kind of felt like a Gushy or a Beaks situation. It's just somebody that's there, and we may get mention of them every once in a while.
I hope that Stephen Root plays him whenever he finally shows up. You know, just this weird dude down in a basement.
Yeah, down by the boiler. Yeah.
Just wall-to-wall dolls.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to talk to this guy.
Yeah. That kind of taps me for this episode. I mean, it was great. It was probably my favorite. And
yeah, undoubtedly. It's my favorite until the next one, which is going to be like an honest to God Halloween episode.
Yeah. That was fun too. I'm glad you brought it feels like it's going to harken back to one of those silly episodes.
Yes.
Let's take a week off of this serious stuff and do something silly. And I'm all for it.
Yeah. I'm already all in.
Yeah.
The address on the house changes. You see it's like 669, and I was like, do it. Yeah, do it.
That's right. And they did.
And sure enough, 666.
Yeah.
I'm in. Next week's, you've already got me.
Yeah, some kind of exorcism.
Yeah. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to that. You're getting a new thing, and I'm beginning to open up to it.
There you go. It's the best any new show can hope for. And let's be honest, like most shows take 5 or 6 episodes to really find their legs. This feels like the perfect point in the season for an episode like this. So, okay. All right, we done?
I think we're done. Yeah, let's call it.
Okay. When leaping through cyberspace, you can find us on Twitter. I'm at Captain Byrne, at CaptnBern. And Nate?
I am at Action Nate, ActionNate.
So much easier than mine. And check out the Poprika feed for movie reviews, pop culture drafts, countless hours of entertainment. Until next leap, I'm Brian.
And I'm Nate.
And we'll be here in the waiting room.